So, first of all, we'll start at the beginning. So what actually is risk? So risk is something that can be defined. It can also be controlled. So it might be something that keeps you awake at night. It might be something that you think about all the time within your organisation, something that you might worry about. So an operational risk could be anything that results in some kind of loss. And at work, a risk could be something like a cyber attack or a security breach. Maybe you have problems retaining staff, specifically since COVID, that's been quite a high risk. But also in our personal lives, it's things like buying a new home or buying a next car. So we're pretty much dealing with risks every day, either at work, at home, and quite often not even realising that we're dealing with risks. The ISO 31000 defines risk as the effect of uncertainty on objectives. So in layman terms, we could describe this as a risk is a future or a potential future event that could affect us from achieving our goals. So what risk do we have here, do you think? So the little mouse, he wants to eat. His goal is to get his cheese. But to eat the cheese, he has to think about the huge risk. He's got a massive mousetrap here. So he needs to decide how much he really wants that cheese. How hungry is he? What's his appetite like? Well, he looks quite hungry, looks quite determined because he's gone and bought himself a little crush helmet. So if he wears his crush helmet while attempting to get the cheese, the impact of his injury is going to be a lot less, but the probability of him getting injured is going to be just the same. So here we've got the risk management process. So risk management is really to ensure that we can achieve our goals, whatever they may be. And the risk management process just provides a bit of transparency and communication around the organisation. And this sort of leads to good governance and good decision making. So you can see here we have 6 areas. We have the 5 steps. And then in the middle of the whole process, there should be ongoing communication and consultation among your teams. So we'll start at the beginning with objectives. So think about what exactly are our goals? What exactly are we trying to achieve here? For instance, our first goal at home might be to buy a new home, might be to change our car. But within our organisations, our goals are more likely to be to deliver our services and ensure that our services are going out to the right areas. Of course, instinctively, we want to jump straight in. As soon as we see that nice house or the shiny new car, we want to go straight away and buy it. But there's always huge value in just taking a few minutes back. Just think about what if? What if this happened? What if that happened? So now you've thought about the what ifs, what could go wrong. You now need to identify those risks. So this is where good team discussions take place. So either workshops or you might have team discussions. You might go wider afield, do some mind mapping, process mapping. So you're looking at any risks that could be evident. So let's say, for example, you decided to sail to France for the day, you fancied a bit of lunch in France. You're also a keen canoeist, and it's a nice, bright, sunny day. So you think, I'll grab my canoe, I'll grab my friends, and off I'll go. What could possibly go wrong? But at this point, you'll probably be thinking, what if I get lost? What if there's bad weather? What if the canoe sinks? So let's think that back to your organisation. So an identified risk could be things like loss of funding for a project, and that could be caused by a changing government grant maybe. Or it might be a major cyber attack, which is caused by maybe a lack of security in your IT software. So this is the stage where you start thinking about identifying those risks. So once you've stepped back and thought, what if? Think a good way of articulating this. So you need to think about, as a result of this could happen, resulting in this. This is a nice, easy way to think about it. So as a result of a cause, a risky event could happen, resulting in the consequence. And there's a little example for you here. As a result of prolonged staff sickness, that's the cause. There's a lack of skills in the office, the risk, meaning that we could fail to deliver our service. That's your consequence. And this is just a little slide showing you how JCAD would pull that information through on a report. So I've put an example here of a bow tie and a butterfly. You can see the cause, the risk, and the consequence. Okay. So we move on to the next stage. The next stage is risk evaluation. This is where you're going to gauge how huge or how tiny the risk might be. So here we need to think about what we've already got in place to help us mitigate against the risk, and what things that we might already be doing that is reducing the likelihood or lowering the impact of it. So remember our little mouse again, he's got a crash helmet, still wants to eat his cheese, and the crash helmet is his mitigation. And as we said, that might reduce the impact if the mousetrap goes off, but it's not going to reduce the probability. And the canoe across the channel, how can we mitigate against a sinking canoe? Those of you who remember Jaws, maybe we're going to need a bigger boat. And of course, what you don't want is to realise you've got a looming risk with no mitigation in place because you didn't evaluate the risk well enough in the first place. So your organisation may have a risk management framework or a risk management policy in place, and that's to determine the impact and the likelihood. Some of you may be familiar with these sort of tables, the likelihood and impact tables, but this is where you would score or rate your risks using these two assessments. So the impact is how severely you'll be affected, obviously, and the likelihood is the probability of it happening in the first place. So understanding the cause of risks helps us to decrease the likelihood, and understanding the consequence helps us to decrease the impact. So the next stage is the risk response. So now that you've identified your risks and how big they're going to be, you've now got to decide how you're going to respond to them. So for a small risk, it may be just enough to keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't get any worse. You might not need to take too much action. But on your more significant risks, those high red risks, you need to think about how to decrease the likelihood or the impact, or both, to something more acceptable. And a good way to summarise how to deal with the risk is by using the 4T models. So we have 4 Ts. So you could treat the risk, that's take action to reduce either the likelihood or the impact, or both. You can tolerate the risk. This might be because it's too small to worry about, and sometimes it is okay to do nothing. You've got everything in place. You could terminate the risk. This is simply stop doing whatever it is that's causing the risk in the first place. But obviously many organisations, particularly in the public sector, you can't just stop doing things. That's very rarely an option. But finally, you might be able to transfer the risk. That might be to an insurance company or an external contractor. So we think back to our canoe halfway across the channel and how we're going to treat the risk. So we could, first of all, we could treat it by finding a bigger boat. We could tolerate that risk. We could say, right, we've got maps on board, we've got life vests, we've got everything we need. We're going to go off to France quite happily. Or we could say, no, it's far too risky. We're not going to go to France. We're going to have lunch elsewhere. Or we could transfer the risk. So we could say, well, we won't go by canoe. We're going to pay for a ticket. We're going to go on a ferry, thus transferring all the risk to P&O or whoever it might be. So just to recap then, so we've worked out what our goals are, or our objectives. We've identified our risks. We've understood the likelihood and the impact of the risk, and we've decided what to do. We're now on the way to achieving our objectives. So the final stage in the process is monitoring and review. And this is just where you take another few minutes to have a look at the circumstances around you, and then any changes that are affecting the risks that you have, anything emerging on the horizon. Maybe there's a few shark fins. So now you need to maybe respond to a bigger risk, but still achieving the same goal. Or maybe the storm that was brewing when you set out from Dover has now passed, so that's reducing your risk. So this is a stage that allows you a bit of time to rethink all those factors, update your risks accordingly, either rescore them, reprioritise them, whatever's required. So that's a basic look at the steps in risk management. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of those themes a little bit more. So we have 4 types of risk. We have compliance risk, hazard risk, control risk, and opportunity risk. And I've just got a little example. So if you own a car or drive a car, so your compliance risks are things like you need adequate insurance to drive a car, you need an MOT. So there's certain obligations that you have to do. Your hazard risks are that your car might get damaged, you might be involved in a road accident, you might pay too much for a car if it's secondhand and realise it's got a lot more wrong with it than you thought. So they're your hazard risks. Your control risks are the uncertainties, and they're normally around your finance borrowing when you buy a car, fuel prices go up quite regularly. And then you've got the opportunity risk, and the opportunities of owning a car. Obviously, you can save money on public transport, enhanced job opportunities maybe because you can drive to different locations. That just gives you an example of all those types of 4 risks. So next we'll just have a look at risk classification. So using risk classification can provide a structure to your risk management, and it helps with generically identifying risk. And the most commonly used classification model is PESTLE. This is very simple to use, and it helps you think about the wider environment when you're thinking about your risks. So political, these are risks around changes in government. Economic risks, so these can be economic growth or decline, particularly at the moment, anything around cost of living. We have sociological risks, and these are around culture and demographics, so maybe an ageing population that we have at the moment. So there might be some housing risks around that. We have technological risks, and these relate to your cyber attacks, your security threats, and more recently AI. That's creating a few conversations. You then have legal, again, government directives, any legislation, new laws that are coming in. And then you have your ethical and environmental risks. So these are ecological, but also around corporate social responsibility. And here's just a little slide of how your risk would look on the JCAD core system. See here, you've got the risk details, the cause, the consequence. You've also got the owner and how you're going to treat, remember the 4 T's, how we're going to treat the risk. And you've got your 2 risk ratings here, according to your impact and your likelihood. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about controls and mitigating actions. So this is thinking not only about what you might already have in place, but any actions you're planning to take as well. I'm going to take you back to our little mouse again. So he's got controls, of course, he's got his little crash helmet, but he may also be thinking about other things as well to help him get that cheese. So he might make sure the cat's not in the house while he's doing that. Or he might wait until it's dark. So that maybe increases his chance of having a quick run at the cheese. And then we have here a very simple picture, but the man on the right in picture, he's mitigated against the risk of rain by carrying an umbrella. Whereas the man on the left, however, he's not mitigated. He either didn't think there was a risk of rain or he decided to tolerate that risk when he went out. So we have 4 categories of controls. We have preventative controls, and these are in place to prevent errors. So these might be things like segregation of duties, authorization of transactions. Pretty much you're trying to stop a risk happening with these. You then have corrective actions or corrective controls, and these are to correct errors to ensure they're not repeated. So maybe training procedures, you might have continuous improvement processes in place. So you're treating the risks there. You then have directive, and these are quite often across departmental structure. So you might have things like standing operating procedures or fire evacuation processes across departments. And then finally, you have detective controls. And these are usually after something's happened. So these controls will be things like your auditing processes or your exception reporting. And this is just a little slide on how your controls would show up on your JCAD system if you're using JCAD. So that's pretty much the end of our quick back to basics. Hope you found some of the information useful. I'm just going to leave you with a final thought of our mouse. He's made a few changes. So I think you just need to think now, is the likelihood changed? and that's neither.
Great stuff.